Hello, as you can see we're back in the garage again. It's been a fair while since the last episode of this video diary, and this will probably be the final one of for the Academy. Might look at road sport next year when I'm going on to do that. But essentially I want to go, the last video diary we just ended up pre-season, so I want to go through some of the final bit of race prep that went on, and then some hints and tips maybe about some of the stuff that I've amended, changed through the year. And I also want to go in and have a look at what I do as a nut and bolt check, which is something important that you have to do for your car. Keep an eye on it. And finally I've got to do a front brake pad change, so I might show you the process that I do for that. Here we go. So I don't think the car had its livery when I last did my video diary, so as you can see it's festooned with stickers and paraphernalia now, as you'll get all that given to you pre-season with instructions of how to actually go about applying. You'll notice my nose and my front wing are missing some stickers, including my big number, mainly because I've just replaced that with a new one because of a slight issue I had at Rockingham. So there you go, the race stickers. Application, if you use the wet method that Caterham suggests, you will have no issues, I'm sure. In the cockpit itself, I've had my seat changed, so instead of having the tillet seat that it comes with, I've now got what they call a bag seat, and this was made by Caterham for me. You can see it's effectively two bits of foam that's moulded to your own shape, so you sit in a bag while it fills with expanding foam, and it comes in two pieces, so you get the lower bit here that you sit on, and then you get a backrest. And just gets taped up by masking tape, by duct tape. It's a fairly straightforward process. You can do it yourself with a bit of, a few hints and tips. But it was a nice process just to go down to Caterham and have that done. While we're talking about seats, you may notice that my passenger seat is gone. I was on the borderline of being overweight, so I decided to take the passenger seat out. Which saves you something like 3 to 4 kilograms, so it's quite a good saving. And the driver's seat, having the bag seat made, also saved maybe another kilogram, maybe more. So by doing that and taking out the rear harness, the lap belts, it's a good saving on weight. I just decided to tape down the two shoulder straps for the passenger rather than remove them. It's actually quite a tricky process to get them in and out, so leaving them in there means that I can get them back, the seat and straps back in if I want to. On my dashboard there's two things I want to point out here. So number one, nice big timer. Just quickly click start on that just before you get going on the race, and then you know how long's left. In the racing that's really important to know how far you've got to go. And you'll know roughly when your last lap is and things, so you can judge your race based on that. And the other tip is a fuel level line, which can be added once you know how much fuel you need to add to make sure you finish the race with enough fuel and enough weight. People's line will vary because these fuel gauges vary as to how much the gauge actually marks. So in fact my nearly full mark here is actually only half a tank full, so that gives you an idea of the variance. Some people's gauges show, properly when the tank's empty and full, but mine just shows half a tank. In the last diary, we also talked about the long acre rear view mirror, and this is what this bad boy is. So as you can see, it's a slightly curved mirror, which gives you a really nice view backwards, both to the left and to the right. It actually replaces I don't have a wing mirror on this side, so I've removed that. But this mirror gives me the view all the way out to the left-hand side of the car, and is a worthwhile investment. The one that comes with the car doesn't give you a very good view out, especially given the number of bars and stuff it's got to look through. So yeah, that's the long acre rear view mirror. Again, last time I was in the garage, my rain light I'd actually attached over here. Because it was too difficult to get around the central point. At the time I said it was probably impossible to get around there, but other people managed it, so I came back and had another look, all in the interest of symmetry. And I actually found, let's get down here, They supply it with a washer that sits under here, but actually I found that without the washer it actually went on just. But it was a real fiddly thing, and I lost at least 2 bolts down there, so it's not a stress-free situation. You can get a bigger P-click if you want. I'm not sure of the exact size, but it's one up from this. Or you can, work out your own bracing method, but it is possible with bits they supply, but only just. I've also changed my V-box positioning since we've been racing. So last time we were here, I had the main camera pointing forward underneath the bar here, and I had the secondary camera on the side here pointing at the driver. For racing, that doesn't make so much sense. You want to see in front and behind, you don't really need to see the driver. So all this, the GPS stays the same, it's just got a bit of duct tape on it now to sort of hold it more in place, stop it slipping down sideways basically. But all the wires now track along to the rear of the car. So here's, a bit dark, sorry, here's my 2 cameras now. So I now have the one that was pointing sideways at the driver, it's now pointing backwards. And here's the front view one now. So that's now looking kind of like that, over my shoulder and out the front of the car, and it gives a really nice view. Having it below this rear bar gives you a better view than above, purely because the rear view mirror gets in the way. So having it below actually gives you a nice view out the front, and is probably the best position that I've found for recording races. I actually have a secondary camera which I attach up here, that looks down, it's my high def camera that looks down there, which gives a good view out the side, but you lose the rear view, so it's not quite as useful. If you were on the ball when we were looking at the seat, you'd have noticed that my shoulder straps have been remounted. So they're now underneath, they're coming out through 2 holes underneath, and they're much, much closer together than they are. When they come from the factory, they look much more like the ones over there, so they're mounted on top and they're much wider apart. So this adjustment is the hands adjustment, so when you want to wear a hands device, basically they have to be put closer together, and you get this adjustment made by Arch Motors. They're up in Huntingdon, so it's a bit of a trek for most people to get over there, but well worth it for the safety of wearing a hands device. And nice to see an old engineering firm and how they're craftsmen that go and adjust your car. It's great. A racing tip for you. Basically, if you're not careful with your exhaust, like I wasn't, it tends to droop when you're going out on circuit, and as you can see I've managed to grind away the bottom edge of the exhaust, just where it's leaning over so much that it's actually scraping on the floor. The way to alleviate this is to be pretty vicious with the clamp that's holding that in place. So there's the bolt down here. It can be. Oh, sorry, you have to get around the back to tighten it. But be really quite brutal with that. Make sure that's really, really stiff connection. It can be really hard to make that tight. Can make some horrible noises when it's doing it. You obviously don't want to completely overdo it, but you certainly want it so that this cannot move when you touch it. When I first started, you could actually move that, and that's why I got mine ground away. It probably happened to you at some point anyway. There you go. Just make that clamp nice and tight, that one there, and then you'll be better off. Another addition to the car, I've changed my wing mirror to a much more streamlined version. As you can see, it's compared to the Caterham one, it's much more narrow and more aerodynamic. It's also another concave mirror. I don't know if you can see that, but it's concave so that you can actually get a wide angle view from it. Pick them up from Demon Tweaks, or there's a few other places that do them. Make sure you get the special pillar mount, so you need a pillar mount to go with it. I think it's called the Spa F1 mirror. It's the more straight out one. There is a 90-degree one, but it doesn't fit very well into these bolt holes, and all it does is it replaces one of the one of the windscreen bolts. You've got to be careful that you don't go in too deep on the bolt, because it can crack the windscreen. The windscreen's obviously not very far away from here, so you need to be careful, and it can be a tricky process to actually tighten it and to keep it so it's actually nice and steady. But basically use the nuts and washers that they give you. So they give you, there you go, a kind of spacer here, a bit of a rubber washer, and then it gets into the actual metalwork of the mount itself. And if you use all those, I found you can go tight without risking your window. You can see that as I'm touching it, it's pretty solid, and that's what you want. You want it to be a rock solid thing. It will move if you really want it to, so you can adjust the angle of it, especially as it moves every time the door opens, and it obviously makes contact as you're getting in. So you will find you're readjusting it, but go as tight as you can here to make sure that doesn't move when you're racing. Last thing you want is that drooping down. When you start your sprints, so that'll be the first 2 events that you do next year and onwards, you need to put the timing strut down here. Now, it's part of the kit. They give you a clamp and 2 bolts to tie it all together. To do it that way, you need to take all the nose cone off. Most people ended up doing it in the morning of the actual event, and all you really need to do is get the behind. There's 2 pieces, so there's a bit that goes behind the grille, and there's one the long bit that comes down in front, and you can just cable tie it together basically. So once you've got the bit behind in, you just cable tie it in, and it's the easiest way. It's perfectly solid enough for what it needs to do for the first 2 events, or it's 3 in my case, but 2 for ongoing. And don't faff around with the bolts is my advice. When I started the year, I ended up taking far too much to in the ways of tools and equipment to the events. It's just taking a long time to load everything up, and most of it I didn't end up using. So what I ended up doing was I ended up with 1 toolbox, and this is the stuff that I carried with me to all the events. Most of this was worked out by doing a full nut and bolt check and a full car sort of check before an event, and putting to one side all the bits and bobs that I'd actually ended up using to do that. And then you really are focused down to the stuff that you know you're going to need, because anything beyond this is probably a pretty serious issue where you're going to have to call the help of other people, and most likely Caterham anyway. Let's have a quick squiz through what I end up taking to events. Let's start here. So really important to have a good tyre pressure tester. You're going to be using that a lot. I started off the season with a pretty poor one, and basically means you don't really know what the situation is with your tyres. So invest in a fairly decent one. It doesn't cost much. I think something like a tenner for a fully calibrated one like this. Much better position to know where you are, and it means as soon as you come in off the track, you can go and check your pressures. Ever useful tapes. So a selection of different tapes there to stick things back together, or just to get things nice and tidy. So there you go, tapes. Ever useful hammers. Haven't had to use them too much this year, but there you go. Always take them with me. Selection of pliers and screwdrivers and the metric and imperial Allen key sets. Here's one. There's a different tool bought throughout the year. This is a Caliper rewind tool used to change your rear brakes. So if you ever need to change your rear brakes, you need this tool. I think it's made by Laser. I just got it off eBay. It's done its job a couple of times for me, which is great. But you need that to actually change the rear brakes. Selection of sockets and the sockets and extension bars, hex sockets as well. Some nylon bolts for the rear wings. They can often ping off during practice or whatever, so it's good to have that. Some Loctite if you happen to need to put a bolt on that doesn't have a thread lock or something. Here's a tyre depth gauge. So what you do is you just shove that into the tyre, and on the gauge it reads out how many millimetres of, see that come into focus, yeah, how many millimetres you've got left. So there you go, that's a useful tool to have at race meets. Essential cable ties, we'll see where one of those is used at least. Torque wrench, again, really important, nearly always set on 74, 76 for the wheels, and so that's the wheel socket, that one. So essential. And for the nut and bolt check, I tend to use, instead of sockets which are hard to get into all the places, I have a good selection of spanners. They all come in pairs as well, obviously, to get left and right. bits done, and I'll show you some of the nuts and bolts to check. And also really important to have some sort of hand cleaning wipes or whatever. The reason I've got Swarfiga ones, clearly nothing to do with the fact that one of our co-competitors is sponsored by them. But there you go, Swarfiga wipes, good for every occasion. A really useful tip here: the dipstick in racing situations, hitting curbs and stuff, can work its way loose, and then oil can then come out the top of it. If the marshals spot oil coming out of your car, they will pull you into the pits. So really good tip. Simple cable tie going around the dip mount means it cannot come out. Bit of a pain when you're checking your oil, which you should obviously do every single event, but nevertheless it stops you having a potential call in. Also, I noticed that just now, and I know that other people have had this, my water bottle had fallen out of its mounting there. Whether that was at the race meet or whether it's happened since, I don't know, but it'd be good to think of a solution to hold that in place as well. Again, you don't want that falling out the bottom of your car and then again marshals calling you in. As you're racing, you will find that oil gets into your catch tanks. Normally for me it's been the left one, and that just means that your engine has been slightly overfilled. In fact, there's probably a little bit still in the bottom, you can see there from rocking them. Eventually you'll get to know your engine, and your engine will stop spitting out so much oil because the level will be correct. But you have to keep remembering to empty these. So again, scrutineering can fail you for having oil in your catch tanks because it can spill. And try and make sure the area around here is clean to show that you're not having oil and debris, because again, they don't like that. Brake cylinder cap. So this is the race brake cap rather than the road one. Road one has a sensor that comes off. You get these wires just plug into it to give you a level sensor, which you need for MOT. But for race situations, this just single cap keeps the pressure in better. On the pedal box, you might have to adjust your pedal positions at some point during a race meet. This bolt down here is extremely difficult to get anything. You need a right-angled Phillips head to go in there. Most people just end up leaving it out. It's much easier that way. The rest of them are fine to get back in and out. There obviously is a bit of a pain, but so most people end up leaving that one out just for that reason. So, as you can see, the car is in what I call nut and bolt checking phase. So it's got all its wheels off, it's got its bonnet, and it's up on its stands. So you can get to all the areas you need to get to. Now I'm going to go around the bits that show you what I check. This might not be as comprehensive as some people do. It might be more comprehensive than others. Some people don't ever do this, but I would certainly recommend it, judging by the number of bolts I do actually end up having to tighten. So let me go around now and I'll show you the main ones and the ones to really watch out for. Okay, and I'm going to start at the rear end of the car, so I'm at the rear of the car now, and first and a really important bolt to check is the radius arm bolt, and specifically this one in here. Comes loose regularly, and if it loosens too much it can start flexing and torquing, and then it can eventually break. So check this one regularly and make sure it's nice and tight. Again, it doesn't have to be rocket ship tight, but just get a spanner on it and turn it until it doesn't turn anymore, and then give it a bit of a nip, and that should do you quite nicely. Again, you can also check the rear attachment point. That hasn't loosened on me yet, but it's always worth checking. It's a quick one to check because it's easy to get to. Other bits at the rear of the car, so again, these ones are really obvious and nice and big, and you can just quickly check that they're nice and tight. They should feel solid, there should be no movement. And the A-frame bolt as well. Again, this has loosened on me a little bit before, so spanner on the back and a socket on the front, and just a quick nip just to check that everything feels solid. Again, I don't check the torques on it, I just get the feel for whether it's different from the last time I checked. You can check in here, you can get underneath the car and you can check the lower damper attachment point there. That's easy to get to as well from underneath the car. While I'm under here, you can also see that I've now got the nylon bolts going through all around. So that's in order that if you do have a prang, your rear wheel arch pings off without actually ripping out all the side panelling as well at the same time, and all the rivet nuts. So a good idea to do that. It's possible to yourself, or get someone to do it for you. Caterham will do it for you happily. It's also really important to check your diff carrier bolts. So the upper bolt here, and then the lower attachment bolts. Again, you just want to check whether they're moving at all. They shouldn't be. They should be nice and solid. If you're continually having to tighten the lower bolt in particular, you could have a cracked diff carrier. So again, it's just a good idea to keep an eye on them all, to keep them tight, but also just to make sure you haven't got another problem that you're not aware of. Okay, the things I do for this video diary. I'm now on the floor underneath the car. This is the rear of the car, and you want to check the rear A-frame bolts. And even further under the car, here's the back of the diff carrier again, with the prop shaft you can see there, and the two bolts either side. And you want to have a good check that the two arms coming down here, that's where they break if they break, so just good look on them every now and then, just to check that everything's as it should be. Again, while I'm there you go, here I'm at the rear of the car. A few people through the year have had broken Speedos, and they can be for a number of different reasons, but one of them can be the Speedo Sensor. So here's the sensor coming in, and basically that aligns with a cog that's sort of down behind here, and it just measures the pulses as it goes round. But they're pretty sensitive as far as breakages go, if they get hit by something or if they hit that cog. So that's where the Speedo Sensor is if you ever need to replace it. Another thing you should do when you're around the rear of the car, as just good habit as much as anything, is to check your thickness of your rear brakes. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you on the camera, but you can. It's going to be tough to show you on the camera. You can have a look at the thickness of the outside quite easily, and by poking your nose in and looking under here with a torch, you can kind of get an idea of the inside one as well. But they go quite quickly when you're racing around, so it's always worthwhile checking that. One final thing while I'm around the back of the car, you'll see we've now got these little tails that stick out the back of the racing cars. No longer are they the chassis toe points. Here's the original chassis toe point. Apparently it's not good enough anymore. It needs to be a bigger radius, so they have to attach these toe straps. And for me, I've just tied it around the chassis member here, similar to the harnesses in that you kind of put a locking, you turn it back on itself to lock it in place, and then a simple cable tie to hold it up here onto the back of the sort of fuel tank area, so it stops it dragging on the floor. You have to remember that if you are ever towed out, then the cable tie will obviously break as it's supposed to, so that they can pull you out. But you'll have to put that cable tie back, otherwise you'll end up just dragging this on the floor, and it'll just get torn to shreds as it drags on the floor. So yeah, that's new for this year, and there's one on the front as well. Let's go and have a look at that now. So here's the front toe strap. So you can see under here, I've tied it to this chassis rail, and then there's a few cable ties to keep the spare end sort of tucked up. I've then cable tied it onto the original chassis toe point, and then another one just to keep it all nicely up in the air. Again, your aim here is just to stop it from dragging on the floor, because otherwise it will get broken. And again, if it ever does get dragged on the floor, it will get knackered, so remember to change it if it ever gets used. So then the nuts and bolts that I check at the front of the car, start with actually inside the engine bay. I check the radiator mounts, and they're nice and easy to get to, top and bottom. So why not, if you can get to them, definitely check them. Let's have a look if we can get in. So here we got the two, that's the front anti-roll bar mounts. Again, they sometimes do loosen off, so again, just a quick tweak. They don't have to be tight, they just have to make sure they're not moving. So check them not every time you come off, but I would say once a day you're on track. I check mine. So some on the other side. I've come around here and I don't really want to, because the next thing is steering column, so that you can see the bolt there with a bit of the marking on it. So there's one there, and there's also one that's 90 degrees the other way. So again, just check they're not have to be super tight, but just make sure they're not moving. So lower front points, they're a nice and easy bolt to check. You just have to, again, you can even torque them if you want, but again, just get used to the feeling of what it feels like when it's tight. Just so give it a nudge, and hopefully you shouldn't find any movement in these. They're done quite tight. I think it's 81 Newton meters or something, so you shouldn't feel any movement there. The rear lower, it's a bit harder to get at, but you can see it down there, and you can see the other bolt down there. So again, you can get a spanner on either end. Sometimes coming from underneath helps, and just check it's nice and tight. There's no particular movement. And again, the more you get used to your car, the more you get quicker at checking these things. There's the engine mount down here. It involves an Allen socket to tighten the engine mount, and then the two that actually put the engine mount onto the chassis rail, they need checking as well. So again, just a quick check every now and again, check nothing's moving, because the bushes on those engine mounts do go, and when they go, you'll find you're tightening that, and that should be a sign that you need to have those engine bushes, the bushes changed. Okay, so the front upper wishbone bolt, another one to check. Again, you can get to both ends with a spanner, but it's awkward because of its positioning, but you can get a spanner in there, and then you can obviously just do a tweak. Just check it's all nice and tight. Again, get used to the feel of it. Top damper, an Allen key needs to go in there, and just to tweak again to check that it's nice and tight. And then the rear, the upper rear attachment point, you can usually get a spanner in from the outside onto this nut here, and then even sometimes a spanner in there, or you can get to the other side as well. Again, just a tweak and a check. But probably the most important bolt to check more regularly than the rest is this one. So that's onto the rear upper mounting. Again, you want to make sure, you can see how I've got a yellow line here, and that's because I check it regularly, just to check it hasn't moved. If that loosens off at all, then the whole of the wheel assembly moves, which is not good for all sorts of reasons. So just check that every time you come off track. Is a good idea to check that one. Okay, so again, front suspension, nice easy one to check down here, so you again might as well do that. Another really good tip, again you can see I've got a yellow marker across my two damper platforms. They can loosen off, so again a nice visual check to check that they haven't moved at all. Check those yellow lines are still lined up. I recommend everyone does that. Sometimes this can loosen off, this one under here. It's hard to get to, but if you steer fully to the left, you can usually get a spanner in there to check that. Okay, and then the rear pads. So while you're looking around the rear, you should always check how much rear pad you've got left, so you can use visual check in there, see how much you've got left now. Looks like on the scale of it like I've got a fair bit left, but if the rear pads get below a halfway mark, generally your pedal gets really, really long, and it can feel horrible on the brakes, which I can confirm my car does currently. So I'm going to actually change those rear pads now, and we might as well go through the process on camera. The front hub bolts is another one to check. Although they're relatively consistent, if they do happen to loosen, or if the play in the bushes or something starts getting looser, the whole wheel can rock, which causes the pad to knock against the disc, and you get what's called pad knockoff, which gives you a long pedal going into some corners where the whole wheel is flexed. So you need to keep an eye on this. The way to do that is to have the wheel on the car, to have the wheel in place, get your hand up here and try and rock the wheel. If there's any play in that wheel at all, it'll feel like a little sort of click as it's going backwards and forwards. And as you can see on mine, the yellow line and the matching yellow don't match up because it's been tightened, and both sides of my car had to be tightened. So just keep an eye on it, so when the wheel's on the car, just give it a good rock, see whether you can hear any clicking or feel any movement, and if it does, just have someone look at it for you. Okay, so here we are at the front caliper. Hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing up here, but it's a really simple job to change the pads. I use a pair of pliers just to get, there's two R clips, so you just pull out, see if you can see that. It's pretty hard to see. Anyway, it's a little clip, keep them to one side. There you go. You have two retaining bars, they just pop out. So let's just put it out there like that. Put them to one side. And they're just little rods with little holes in. And then your brake pads should be free to come out. Now, I've actually loosened these off slightly to make the job of taking this video easier. But effectively, you can use a couple of pliers and things just to quickly lever out the pad. And as you're doing it, if you use the pad, if you rock the pad back against a little bit, it gives you a bit of leeway, and the pads should then just pop out. Looks like there's plenty of meat left on this pad, which is the one I'm taking out. But in a racing situation, you don't really want to go below halfway on your pads, like I say, because it makes your pad feel horrible. Here's the depth of a new one. And if you compare that to the one that's coming out, you can see that it's roughly halfway. So again, that's why I'm changing these. Here's a quick tip. You see on the back, I've got written the number 3. Wheels number. I always number the back of my pads, starting from the driver's side. Outside pad is 1, inside 2, and then the inside here is 3. Hence the 3 there. And then I've got the number 4 pad ready to go here. That means that if you ever do take them out at a race meet, you can always put them back in the right place, which can become important. So I'm just going to take out this other pad, so that's the old number 4. And then hopefully, if I've done this right, number 3 should be able to slot in its place. Again, just tuck it in there. Here goes number 4 in. And again, this can be a bit of a wiggle. You might need to flex the pad a little bit. It does eventually slide into place. There you go, making this look very easy. There you go, it's gone in. So a bit of a wiggle against the piston can get it to go in. And then you need to just eventually pop the 2 rods back in. They go through the outer hole. Again, you can't really see that from where you're sat down there. Let's see if I can cock my elbow for this low one. Goes through the outer hole, then goes through the top hole of the actual 3 pad, through the top hole of the 4 pad, and then out the other side. And then you need to twist it to line up. So you can see the little hole that the R-clip goes in. And again, I just use a pair of pliers to pop it back in place. Okay, that's 1 bar done. Again, top hole through the top bit of the pad and all the way across. There we go. And remembering the little R-clip again. Okay, and that's it done. So that is all there is to a front brake pad change. You need to do the same obviously that side. And remember the first time you drive it after doing that, the first brake press will be all about taking up your piston travel. So don't be using those brakes in anger the first time you press it. It's a pretty messy job. Get dirt all over your hands. Hence the reason for the handy Swarfiga hand wipes. Good for any occasion. I think we're nearly there now. But while I was just about to put the tyres on, I remembered that it's a really good idea to mark up your tyres for where they've come from. So here, right rear, so obviously all the others are marked up accordingly. Again, you don't want to be going out on track with tyres that have not worked on a particular corner before, because it takes a little while for them to bed into the corner of the car they're on. So mark up your tyres. If you want to prolong longevity of your tyres, you can swap them around a bit, and it's good to do diagonal swaps. So a right rear tyre would become a left front tyre, and that way they wear a bit more evenly and last a bit longer, because the rears, or the left hand side, tends to get more hammered than the right hand side. So a diagonal swap of each corner of the car is the way forward. So that's tyres. And while we're talking about nut and bolt checks, check your wheel nuts are right to the right torque every single session. So every time you come back into the pits, religiously check that they do loosen, and you don't want them loose going around the track. So that's pretty much it for the video diary series then. This is the third one I think I've done, and I've pretty much covered everything I've done for the year now. It's almost the end of our Academy year. We've only got one race left. If you are doing the Academy next year, I wish you good luck, or in the years to come. I hope the video diaries have proved useful in some way, or if you just bought a Caterham, then happy travelling, happy blatting in your Caterham. Let's say one round to go for me. Fingers crossed all goes well. But I've met a lot of friends along the way, and enjoyed myself a great deal. So hope you've enjoyed watching, and I'm sure I'll be videoing something else about road sports next year. Cheers, bye.